Hello, and welcome to this episode of Unboxing Women, where we explore why women in business are often called such a bitch. My name is Maika Rose, and with me is my friend Dana and Rexx, and we are both independent recording artists and singer-songwriters based in Europe. You can listen to us on our YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast platform. And we have a guest with us today. Her name is Angela Durrant, and she is a voice coach for musicians and has been for the past 12 years. She comes from a very musical background, which hasn't stopped her from venturing out into the business world as well. So, Angela, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes I think I'm one of those failed musicians that found a destiny somewhere else, really. My family background was maybe people can relate to it. Sometimes you grow up and you see a lot of people around you and they all seem to be either super confident or doing things. So my family background is that my uncle and my grandfather were at the top of their game as variety artists, what we call in the UK music hall. So you can YouTube him. My uncle was a ukulele player and film star in the 40s called George Formby. And George Formby was incredibly mega famous, so much so that there is still a convention in the UK that meets every single year, even though he died in the 60s. So he was incredibly famous, a bit like the Kardashians today or something in their time. Now, he died before I was born, so I never actually met my uncle. But I do remember growing up and traveling around the UK with my parents. And my dad was a performer, comedian, and he took that act in the sort of 1970s variety all around the music hall theatres of the UK when I was a child. So some of my overriding memories are standing at the side of stages in sort of musty old UK theatres, watching comedians that were sort of at the top of their game. And I think I kind of got this idea of audience connection and being in front of an audience from just watching people at the top of their game and how they acted and their ability to be in front of an audience and just transform them. So from there, really, I always wanted to be a musician. My mum was a classical singer and my dad was a variety and a comedian. So it's kind of like a mixed metaphor. Didn't quite know where to land myself, as it were. But I ended up going towards a more sort of classical career, I think, because you're just generally influenced by what's around you at the time. And that's what that was the only thing that was around me at the time was classical music. So I went in that direction and eventually didn't end up at music college straight away. I ended up leaving home and actually moving to Cardiff from Birmingham, which is sort of like halfway across the UK country, in order to kind of find myself in my early 20s, as it were, because I didn't quite know where to go with it all. I had actually been around touring with a musical in my teens and even been into a recording studio, but nothing was really sitting, as it were. But I ended up in a recording studio for 4 years before even going to music college. And that 4-year stint in the recording studio, that was absolutely fascinating because the amount of things that I worked with behind the scenes. I absolutely love the recording process now, and I love sound and acoustics. But that variety of a career, I never thought that would come back to help me, as it were. But I ended up going to music college and restudying classical, and then sort of embarking on a career. But one of the biggest things that really I struggled with confidence issues to start with. And I struggled with not always knowing where to put myself and where to fit myself in the music arena. So you tend to go down acceptable routes and you never really truly sit there and find your own path. So it wasn't until my late 20s, really, as I was sort of having a bit of a sort of a part career here, some work here, some work there, etc. And it wasn't really transferring itself into anything really, really major. Certainly, I was not going to be like my uncle or my grandfather. That was clear. And so at one point, I remember kind of having that moment where you go, do you want to be doing this in your sort of 40s and 50s and trying for this career that you're not quite sure where to sit with? Or do you want to actually really rethink this whole area and what's available to you. And it was that one question in my mind that actually opened up. Maybe sometimes you lose a fantasy and find a destiny, because I think for some people, they really do need to go towards a music career, and other people need to have careers that are in the music industry, and they find themselves in lots of different ways. And for me, I wanted to be a mentor, and I started to want to teach people things that I had never been taught. And that led me to probably working with about 1,000 different singers and speakers over the last 12 years, which I would never have done if I'd have just faffed around trying to make something of myself, to prove something to somebody that didn't really matter, if that makes sense. So I've really enjoyed my teaching career. I've really enjoyed helping people get management deals, get onto theatre school, sort themselves out and actually have a music career or a pathway and find their own unique way through the music industry and what they want to make of it. Because I really did feel as if there was not a lot of guidance for me when I really needed it. There was an idea of what you should do. And if you didn't fit into that mold, as it were, then you might as well forget it. And that is such a shame, because for me, at my time, there was never the option to try and find your own unique expression, your own pathway. So one of the things that brings a great joy to me that I truly, truly love is working with up-and-coming singer-songwriters, up-and-coming musicians, because now I've obviously had I've had both a theatre background, a performance background, a stage background, and also a recording engineer background. So I've been well placed with all of those different things to help guide people to finding their particular voice, their unique style, and finding out, well, how to make a business out of this music. Because the idea of the music business is like Eric Morecambe, one of our UK comedians, said in the 70s, it's not show business, it's often business before the show. And so many don't really find their feet because they haven't got that business acumen. They don't quite know where they sit with their style. And I just feel as if that's a space I've been able to help a number of people in, where I couldn't have been helped in my own journey, as it were. So that's a little bit of a potted history for you.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, very inspirational. I want to book a session, actually. I'm like, I need to know more. Help me.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I've known Angela for a while, so I've heard a lot of this before, but I think it's incredible how when you think about it, you having gone through your career as an audio engineer for those 4 years, and then going into classical singing, and then going into teaching, where you had to start learning not just classical, but other styles as well, because people who were coming to you were contemporary. And then if you think about that, all of that put together, you don't just think about voice or the vocals from the inside, but also what is actually, as an audio engineer, you also think about, okay, so this is how it looks when recorded, and this is how, I don't know if I'm expressing myself correctly, but you know so much more about sound than just one side. Like usually you're either a vocalist or you know about recording. And I think it's interesting. I think that's probably given you quite a unique perspective on how the voice works.
Yeah, actually, yes, I think it has. And here's what I discovered. When I first set up a teaching practice in 2009, I seemed to have an innate capacity. I'd been around the business world before, and I had an innate understanding of visibility and maybe how to market myself. And what I realized immediately was that the people or the things that I had trained in, say classical singing and singing with orchestra and going out, etc., they weren't the people that were coming to me. And I had a choice to make at that point. Did I serve the people that were coming to me, or did I just wait for what I was used to? And I decided to serve who was in front of me, and that took me on an incredible learning journey. And so there are times to hold out for what you want, and there's times to actually look at what are the opportunities that are right in front of you, because life can take you on incredible journeys if you will say yes to some of those. And we have to kind of take the blinkers off a little bit. So what happened is, when these people were coming to me, And, I don't like to fluff people. I don't lie to them. I wanted to know. And I wasn't going to take people's money if I couldn't actually send them in the right direction and help them. So I started to research contemporary vocal techniques, and I brought into Wales, which was then something called speech level singing. Since I've studied several other vocal methodologies at the same time, but that was one that was that was in the US at the time, and it was a classical singer who had created a lot of exercises that were helping contemporary singers, and so that really appealed to me. And Seth Riggs was his name, and he was literally I think the catalyst for many, many vocal coaches of top quality in the US that are now working, with high-end people, and speech level singing has kind of changed its approach, and it has different sort of facets of it now, etc. And methods are only a tool in the bag, as it were, but it enabled me to really grow my vocal practice here in Wales. It enabled me to help a lot of people very, very quickly. And it took me on my own personal vocal journey in a way that I possibly couldn't have ever gone. So within a space of 2 years, I'd already cleaned up all of my own vocal habits, and I was singing belt and rock and working with all these different things. And it really was amazing to me, because I had this firm belief that you weren't born one type of singer. That was preference, if that makes sense, I was only around a certain type of singing. I had no other kind of graduation into anything else. But I had such fun for a couple of years singing in a gospel rock band and learning how to actually sing belt and to really sort of understand how to change my vocal muscles and my mechanism to meet the demands of what was in front of me. So as a teacher, it made it much, much easier for me to have empathy, to understand and to lead some of my singers from maybe singing in one particular facet to another, and to overcome habits that they may have picked up along the way that they might, through lack of confidence or through overthinking or self-concern, think it was going to take them out the game. And actually you could fix these things pretty quickly. And that's quite transformational, when we can do that with people.
I'm actually hearing a couple of things. So you do vocal coaching and techniques, but then there's the business facet as well, where you guide people through. Well, it's a little bit of what do you want to do kind of thing. So explain those two sides for me. Cool.
Well, that how I started off was wanting to be as good a vocal coach as I possibly could be, because I was learning my craft at the time, back in the sort of late 2009, 10, 11. And as I was doing that, when you're starting to work with a lot of people time and time again, you start to see some trends, you start to see some commonalities, etc. And here's what I kind of understood. I thought there were some people that were coming to me that desperately wanted a career, and they desperately shouldn't have had one. It wasn't the right move for them at all. It just wasn't, They were hankering after something. They could be so satisfied and do so well if they would actually kind of look in a different direction or do it for a hobby, etc. And this is going to it sounds really interesting, but there were some people, they just weren't, they loved singing, they wanted to sing, but they were putting a wrong kind of pressure on themselves to enter into a music business that was a music business, that they didn't have the character to keep them there. And they didn't really they were the wrong age, unfortunately, for some things, or for what they wanted to go into, or they needed to really take themselves in a direction that was owning a different niche or a different pathway. And there were some people that I could truly see, with a few tweaks here and there and some understanding of how to actually market themselves and move forward, could potentially have the careers that they didn't think they could have. And it would take focus, and it's a bit like personal branding. It's never just the voice, because if it was the voice alone, how good you are, or in your own mind, then more people would be professional musicians. But there's always people that have a great look, they have great songwriting ability, they have a great sort of charisma, they are able to really sort of work themselves as a product and a marketable force. They are the people that have an opportunity to move forward. And it might feel a little bit harsh to say so, because I do believe that every single person has the right to sing, the ability to sing, and that there is a route to either an enjoyment of singing or a career in singing and musicianship. But it is not an easy route to take, as you both will probably understand. And we have to lift the lid off the ability to even go there in the first place. But I found that I wasn't being true for people if I didn't say, do you want this enough to go all in? Do you want this enough to actually put the work in, put the training? Because you can't turn up to me a week later and go, well, the dog ate my vocal homework, miss. It's not going to work. It's kind of like you can't just make an excuse. You have to go all in, and you have to kind of really want it. And my husband was a music producer. I married my music producer husband, but not the time I was in the studio. And he would used to say, he said he would work with bands, and he would say, he would take their demos and sort of produce it into an amazing place. And then they'd kind of implode on the inside, because that journey from taking themselves from an amateur to a professional happened in the mind before it happened in the music and everything else. It happens in the mind. So mindset, in 2018, I went off to study psychology to help people really order this mindset, the marketing and the music. If we don't bring all three together, people that genuinely want to have a career in music are going to sort of sabotage themselves in one place or another. So for me, it's been a huge 12-year evolution to look at an artist in front of me and go, who is this unique person in front of me? What is the road and the pathway that this person really needs to take to actually go in the direction of their dreams or where they really want to go? And just very, very occasionally, I have to say to a few people, not a lot, because I do only take on people that I know now I can actually do something with. But it was that bit to go, do you know what? Kind of take a side journey or go in a different direction or think outside the box. And then suddenly other areas of music or other things open up to people, or other routes even into what they're doing. But you kind of have to take all the blinkers off, all the box off, and you have to see yourself as both a musician. You have to mentor yourself. You've got to be your own best friend, or you've got to have a good mentor that you can, in the music industry, that you can rely on. And you've got to be able to form those business connections and those understandings long term to take you in the direction where you want to go, as if you were starting any other business. Yeah. And that might sound quite sort of direct and strategic, but 12 years down the line, you can't, you can take people where they want to go. But I found if I'm honest and not fluffy, I can get the best out of people, and then we can get them there faster than they would have tried on their own.
Yeah, that's always great. But it's true. I mean, you have to be, realize that as an artist, you are a business, and you need to market yourself. You need to, have a brand. You need to do all that business work before you can, you have to sell yourself as a product, basically. And that's sometimes hard for people to do, or to understand, or to, they feel a bit weird about that because they're a person, obviously, but it's still, you're still a product in the end. Yeah,
it is. And just to kind of, sweeten the pill a little bit, is that you've got to have a great product to market. So you have to start with your craft. You have to start with your songwriting and your craft and your own inner, pressing the find me button and your inner artistry. That's where it starts, because without you being convinced that you have a story to tell the world, music to share with the world, and you give yourself permission to step up onto your own spotlight to do it, because nobody's going to give you permission. You've got to take that permission on the inside. When you've lit that touch paper on the inside of you, then it's not so difficult to start to put the other pieces in place. But many, many people, they want to skip steps and they want somebody to make it easy for them. And here's the easiest way to make anything easy for yourself. Slow yourself down. Do what you need to do to turn yourself into the musician and the artist that you are proud to actually go out with. It's not about perfection. It's about you going out with a wholehearted sense that you've got something important to say to the world through your music. And when you actually have that on the inside, the rest is simply like icing on the cake, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
So just leading it in a slightly different direction, because we do always ask our guests this question. Have you ever been called such a bitch?
Yeah.
As in a professional setting.
In a professional way, because you are a woman in the music industry. And well, I don't know about mentorship.
I don't think I have. I don't think I have personally. I've probably called it to myself a couple of times. I haven't personally, but I think that's because I think depending on it, and I really think the people that are called such a bitch are braver than the ones who haven't had it called them yet. And I'll say, I really think that's true, because if somebody's saying to somebody, "Oh, you're such a bitch," they're standing up for themselves. And yet I kind of almost want to encourage people, if you haven't had it said to you yet, you probably have something more to say.
Be more of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I also think it might also be because, having worked as a vocal coach for so long, vocal coaches are traditionally seen as female, right? At least in Germany. I don't know how it is in the UK, but generally, maybe it's because I grew up with female vocal coaches, but for me, I think of vocal coach as female, which is obviously not true, because I know there are male vocal coaches out there. But maybe that's also part of the reason, because you were in a more feminine, in air quotes, job.
Yeah, I think that's
perspective.
That has something to do with it. Yeah, it's like the nurturing and teaching job in the music, kind of. So it fits. While
I think.
If you're like one of our other guests, if you're playing the guitar, it's like, oh my God, a female musician, and she wants her sound or her this or that a certain way. Oh my God, she's such a bitch. Or even when you're a singer and you try to.
I think it comes from. I think you're absolutely right. Being a teacher and being a mentor, there's a space I've had to fall in, because the majority of people that I work with, they need me to have empathy and to understand what they're going through. So I would probably be dealing with the person that has been called such a bitch.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And I would not be wanting to dampen that down in any way, shape or form, because I think it's absolutely vital that we have more females with a voice. Even on the Brits last night, even if it was, I don't know how much they had females winning the prizes because it was contrived versus real. It doesn't matter to me. It matters that actually we are highlighting women in the music industry, that we are giving them a platform, and that they are being seen and being heard for what they're able to do and contribute. That's way more important for me, that we're having the conversation and that we're giving the platform. It doesn't, I've been called a bitch in business, as it were, not necessarily in the music business, but in other areas. But that
there you go.
There you go. Do you know what? It happens though, because you are often challenging norms. And here's the thing is, sometimes, certainly I find it in a different context, as it were, but sometimes women feel as if they need to, there's a fine line, I think, being called a bitch because you are really standing in your full power. And it's almost like a comment because you've kind of hit on somebody else's boundaries. Sometimes women feel that that's the way they have to act to be heard, and it's not. And there's a fine line between the difference between being aggressive to be heard, in which case you're just simply shouting at the world, and that's not the place to be heard in. If you're standing in your full presence, if you're really shining your light, if you're speaking your truth, you may well be called a bitch, but it's not because you've come from the wrong energy behind it. It's because you're absolutely standing in your full power. And I think just knowing the difference sometimes can can make a big difference as to how women courageously step into that power rather than feel they have to fight or force for it.
I think it also makes a big difference for the people, like the women who are doing the talking, because if you feel like you constantly have to shout and be aggressive or whatever to be heard, then you're going to get resentful, you're going to get angry, you're going to get bitter, and it's much nicer for yourself if you know I will be heard, and this is how I do it, and I don't have to be angry, and it takes a load off, I think, emotionally.
There's a great quote, isn't there, that says, "Be so good that they can't ignore you." And that doesn't mean, and I love that quote because for me, it's about staying on your own piece of paper, staying in your own lane, forming creating the music, the pathway, the story, the life that you want to create with it, and being completely unapologetic about that. And actually, because when you're working on yourself with this, when you're really stretching yourself in the way an athlete would, whether it's physical voice that you need to work on, so that you've got a solid technique that you're confident with, whether it's your musicianship, your songwriting skills, your artistry, your performance, the way that you do your records, or even the way you market yourself, all the way through the chain. If you really work on every piece of that to the best of your ability, you're kind of going to find a place for yourself, because you're going to get to that place where you are remarkable, where you're going to be seen and heard, because it's literally like a lighthouse. You're so consumed with actually putting that thing out into the world that it's almost like you don't even need to worry what people are going to say and do around it. What's most important to me is somebody unapologetically standing up and sharing their gifts and their talent with the world, and using every available method of communication and channel that they can get that out on. If they will find a place in where it works for them. You can never guarantee success in its major form, because you're not in, nobody's kind of got that pendulum swing. And you hear so many artists that kind of go, and then this happened, and suddenly I had my big break. Well, there's no overnight success. There is a plethora of artists and musicians working, for the previous 5 to 10 years, sometimes behind the scenes. And that moment can often come if they are wanting it and they're still happy and hungry with what they're doing and sharing. They will find their space. I'm absolutely convinced of that. If they want to find their space, they will.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. It's like a snowball, and it just goes down the mountain. It gets bigger, 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 and you can't have that one thing happen to you if the snowball is not that big already.
Right.
So it's kind of the momentum and the mass that you create by just keeping on, just doing it and growing.
Absolutely. And you just know, it's like if you feel, and that's actually, I was working with 2 singers this morning, 2 singers with the same problem, one guy, one girl. Okay. Both, here's the biggest problem. They were waiting until they were kind of wanting to get everything perfect. Yeah. Getting everything so perfect in their singing, because and this is the kind of, I suppose, the dilemma with vocal coaching with people is that some people need vocal coaching, or they need that support right at the get-go to get their confidence up, to find their artistry, to find their framework, as it were, and to use that as a kind of launch pad off. And then there's other people who go, I don't want a voice coach because they'll completely stop my style. Not true if you get the right kind of thing at all, but this idea of kind of getting in people's style, well, they're the ones that will actually probably be out there in the market pushing themselves forward. They might shred their vocal cords here and there, and then they end up getting some help later on. It kind of doesn't matter. You kind of need it when you need it, if that makes sense. But I really want to encourage people that feel as if they are overthinking absolutely everything to just let that slide off the table and go almost like ready, fire, aim. Don't wait until you think you're ready. Go before you think you're ready, because what you do and the marketplace you will naturally find or lose opportunity. That does not mean that you have to take yourself out the game. It means that actually everything you're getting is feedback for you to go back and try again. And you have to be tough. You have to kind of be able to take the no's and the yeses and kind of fall apart in front of an audience, then have to kind of get it together again and come back again and again. But those shy souls that have immense talent and they're hiding behind the scenes, waiting to get themselves perfect, then that's probably going to be the person that is one of the most talented people that we could see in the world who doesn't shine their light. So I encourage people to just to not wait until they're perfect. Get the help you need along the way, but get out there and start doing this thing now to find your feet. That's because it's really hard if you're just overthinking everything all the time.
Yeah, get ready for the next failure.
I think actually adding to the metaphor that Dana said earlier with the mountain, like the snowball rolling down the mountain, I think at the beginning it's more you're rolling your snowball up the mountain, and at some point you've come to the peak, and then it starts rolling and gaining momentum, and that's when you know you've done something.
Your tipping point, as it were. So,
Exactly.
Like Dana, what was your tipping point?
I don't know if I'm there yet. To be totally honest,
your recent songs have gotten 50,000 streams or something. Yes, that's amazing.
They're both over 50,000, and I have an EP coming soon. And yes, a lot is gonna happen around that as well. We've got this whole marketing campaign and everything set up, so we're waiting to go and see what happens with that. Yeah. But,
so when was the point, kind of almost that place where I like to sometimes, I find myself curious of asking the questions too here. Because I think it's kind of like there's importance. We sometimes see people having some success and we kind of have this grey area and we don't know, did something just magically happen for them? Did unicorns and rainbows fall on them, as it were, or was it some consistent kind of plugging? And then suddenly, before you know it, there seems to be a momentum. And I think it is important to kind of give people a true reflection, because I think sometimes reality TV shows, the idea of a big music vehicle to take you forward. There's this idea of somebody make me a star. And actually, you make yourself that.
Yeah.
You start off with that. So I was just curious as is there something you can define that felt like your slight movement or tipping point in a new direction?
Not really. I'm just, I continue to hammer away to pave the road in front of me. So that's obviously you start meeting people, you start to have your network, and that's so important. Everybody keeps saying that, but it is true. It's so important in the music industry. So the more people you know, and the more people you start to reach out to, and the more that starts happening on your socials or with your music, and you start learning about yourself as well, and your sound changes, and it's just this whole journey. And I don't think that there's one without the other. So yeah, it's like you said, some people think, that all of a sudden you see this new artist in the charts. It's like, oh my God, an overnight success. But this person has been working on that probably for years and years before.
and women probably working a darn sight harder.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
That's behind it. But I do remember an interview with, it was years ago now, but with John Bon Jovi. And the interviewer said, when did you know you'd made it? And it was quite interesting. I've never forgotten what he said, because I think here is the truth of it. He said, well, there's been huge career highlights that I can say to you. He said, but I can't ever say to you, I feel like I've made it. He said, because if I say that I've made it, it's like there's nothing else to make. And I feel like there's still so much more in me to give, and so much more in me to explore, even if it's not those type of career highlights, which I thought was an incredible way for artists to see it. Because otherwise there's a kind of, it reminds me of my daughter in the car. Are we there yet, Mummy? Are we there yet? Am I there yet? Are we there yet? And actually, there's no way of knowing. There's just the next step, and the next step, really, isn't there?
Yeah, and it also kind of, if you think, oh, I've made it, it kind of takes away the nothing bigger will come. You know, it's like, oh, I've made it, I can't get any bigger than this. That's kind of sad. You kind of sit there and be like, well, you don't know that.
And sometimes there's I kind of look at artists a bit like a Christmas tree. In every generation, there's like probably one or two stars on the Christmas tree that we really know, the Beyoncés, the big top stars, as it were. And then underneath that is all of the other branches on the Christmas tree. And all the other artists, all the other people that make that happen, etc., in the music industry. And that star could not be that star if there wasn't all of the other branches and everything else sitting underneath that at the same time, and occasionally we want a new star and and there's always the next opportunity then,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You were saying you also did some sessions where people can subscribe.
Yes. So if somebody is looking for actual vocal help, then there'll be some sort of links, I'm sure, that people can connect with me through Instagram, etc., or other means. But I also, again, in terms of helping people create their visibility or their plan of what they want to do. So I run visibility boot camps, and they're free to attend, and they help people to get really clear on what it is they're trying to even describe themselves as. So sometimes I've got artists, not just people in business, etc., but artists are going, well, how do I describe myself? What do I put on on an album cover, or what genre do I go in for, etc. And that's part of your own sort of brand identity, and that's across the board, no matter whether you're a musician or you're in a job that or something that you run, a business you run yourself. So I run visibility boot camps. And, and my door is basically, my email door is always open, or my DM door, as it were, is always open for people to ask a question. Because if depending on what the question is, I can help point people in the right direction. It's just sometimes that next step to go. So people can connect with me either with some of the boot camps, etc. And I run a membership for people if they're looking to market themselves. So that can be creatives that want to sort of market themselves within the music industry or with what they're doing, and that's under thevisibleclub.com. And so you can find thevisibleclub.com, and then there's some links for boot camps. But yeah, just for me, it's like the whole aspect of being a creative or being in business or in music for yourself needs a wholehearted, rounded approach. And I've just been really fortunate to be able to see that from all angles with an artist, from, as you say, from the recording side of things to the performing side to the business side, even to the mindset side. So I feel very privileged that I've had enough of a background to be able to help an artist as a 360 way forward.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say I highly recommend anything from Angela. But especially the Visibility Bootcamp is going to be great. Yeah. So
I'm definitely going to do the next
check
one.
It out.
You'll see me there.
Oh.
All right.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for tuning into Unboxing Women. Be sure to connect with us on our socials, which you can find in the show notes. Send us a DM or let us know your personal experiences with the hashtag #SuchABitch. Here's a little banner. There you go. Today's guest has been Angela. Thank you again for coming on the show. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much.
I've loved it. Thank you.
So all of the links to Angela's projects will be in the show notes, so be sure to check those out, and I will be on the next coaching session, definitely. Don't forget to support your favorite artists through merch or donations. My name is Dana Rexx, and I've been chatting with Maika Rose and Angela Durrant. This is a bi-weekly show, and we will be back for you all in 2 weeks' time, same same place.